G'day cocktail lovers, I hope you're keeping well. I hope everything's going okay for you. I know in lots of parts of the world people are starting to get quarantine and lockdown that we went through in Melbourne for many months, and we're now completely free of COVID, which is probably for a limited amount of time, but it feels pretty good. And so there's a kind of sort of normal happening here, to the extent that there's a party next door, but then maybe that just sounds like I'm working in a bar rather than like my kitchen. So if you hear noise, that's what it is, and it's actually legal now. Someone having a party, so that's a good thing, isn't it? I do feel slightly guilty that more and more people I know around the world are going into lockdowns and quarantine and isolation, and it sucks. It absolutely sucks, and I worry that actually what's happening around the world, particularly in the northern hemisphere, is not going to be enough. But we soldier on, and hopefully I can provide a little bit of a distraction, a bit of a light spot. I was looking up ideas for cocktails to make this week, and I have a bit of a theme happening this week, and it's birthdays of people who in one way or another were influential or known in the cocktail scene in the 20th century. And the first one is one that's completely new to me. I was just looking things up and I discovered one Lucius Beebe. His birthday was the 9th of December. He was born in 1902. Unsurprisingly, no longer with us. But he was a very larger than life character. He sounds absolutely amazing, and I'm surprised I hadn't heard of him up till now. Among other things, he wrote a book about the drinks in his favourite bar, the Stork Club recipe book, and he wrote about food and whatnot, and he had a rather flamboyant life and a rather flamboyant writing style. For the time, he was pretty daring in that he was openly gay, and he just loved the high life. He had very expensive handmade clothes, fur-lined coats, handmade shoes. He travelled in private rail cars. He had 2 private rail cars made. That was essentially the private jet of the early 20th century. And he loved fully stocked bars. Like, he would have grown into adulthood in Prohibition, where I think he was between the ages of about 18 and 30 for him is when Prohibition happened. He was renowned to have had in his apartment a hidden bar. He'd put a false wall in, and when guests came around he could sort of push and that would spin around and have a fully stocked bar there. And his rail cars apparently also had bars and wine cellars built into them. He was more than a tad flamboyant, and he loved very colourful turns of phrase as well as his drinks. He referred to New York as Babylon on the Hudson, and he thought that the food writers in New York were so catty. And I'm going to look away for a second, read this word for word, because there's no way I could remember. This is pretty florid prose. He said, we're talking about it, with only 1 or 2 exceptions, there are no 2 of New York's restaurant writers who can pass the mutual time of day without the possibility of a stabbing. So that's apparently how competitive New York food writers were and how much they disliked each other. But for Lucius Beebe's birthday, I'm going to make the Stork Club Cocktail from his book, and let's get into that right now. First up in the Stork Club, we have 1 ounce of gin. I am going to use an Australian gin from Applewood. It's pink. It's called Coral. Unlike a lot of pink gins, which tend to be sweet or possibly grapefruit flavoured, the pink colour and some of the dominant flavours come from an Australian botanical that actually grows by the sea and absorbs a lot of the sea salt. So Apple would say this has captured the spirit of the Australian seaside, hence calling it coral. It's not actually salty as such, but it's got some very interesting flavours in it. So I'm going to start out with 1 ounce of gin. We're also adding 1 ounce of orange liqueur. You can use the orange liqueur of your choice, whether that be triple sec, Cointreau. I'm using an Australian dry curacao from Marionette. Where'd I put my jigger? There we go. So again, 30 mils or 1 ounce of orange liqueur. The Stork Club also calls for 1 ounce of orange juice. So if you will forgive the innuendo, I'm going to remount this orange to get 1 ounce of fresh juice. We're also adding half an ounce of lime juice. This I squeezed and strained a little bit earlier, but yeah, half an ounce of fresh lime juice. The final touch is some orange bitters. Just going to add a couple of dashes of orange bitters into our shaker. We add ice to our shaker, bang it in hard, something Lucius Beebe probably never said, and shake it for about 10 seconds. I strained the juice before adding it to the cocktail, so I'm just going to do a simple strain with the Hawthorn strainer into a suitably elegant glass. I think Lucius Beebe would have wanted an elegant glass. There we have the Stork Club. To accompany the Stork Club, I have the milk clarified Stork Club. As I foreshadowed last week, I thought it would be fun to do a comparison between the freshly made Stork Club and a milk clarified version that I made to do close-ups for the video. And as you can see, the clarification is pretty dramatic. It's almost completely clear just by adding it to milk and then filtering it through the actual curds from the separating milk. But now, a taste test. I haven't tasted even the clarified one, but I'll taste the freshly made Stork Club first. That's not bad. There is a good balance. I rarely have cocktails with orange juice because I think orange juice dominates too much if it's in a drink. And particularly when there was a full ounce of orange juice in here, I wasn't sure how that would go, but still getting the botanicals from the gin. It's really quite nice. The curacao, I'm not really tasting because the fresh orange juice has overpowered it, but there's a very strong orange element obviously as well. But now, for comparison, the clarified version. Oh, yep, as is typical, it's not universal that milk punches or milk clarified cocktails don't taste like alcohol, but it's pretty common. And in this case, it's like, yeah, it's even toned down the orange juice in this. This is a disturbingly light drink. I think I say that almost every time I make a milk clarified cocktail. It's spooky how easy it would be to drink a lot of this. You wouldn't realize the alcohol content, you know, with a full shot of gin and of the curacao as well. It's not the booziest drink by a long shot, but it is certainly not booze free. Well, I don't know, I think Lucius Beebe would approve that I've tried to live life to the full and do a comparison between his Stork Club and a clarified Stork Club. I think a clarified version of a cocktail is always interesting. It's not always better, but it's always interesting. In this case, I would say better. Like I said, orange juice in cocktails, not my favorite thing. This is not a terrible cocktail by any stretch of the imagination. It's actually more balanced than I thought it would be. But the clarification process has really taken the acidic edge off the orange juice, and the flavors are all still there, but very, very gentle. It softens them, which is quite common for milk clarified cocktail. Well, cheers to Lucius then. Luscious Lucius, as some people called him. Quite the man. I'm quite amazed I only heard about him now. Hey, if you've only heard about him now, and you've only heard about me now, it'd be great if you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the little notification bell so you know when I upload videos. You can come back and who knows what else we might find. I learned something in researching for this video, and one of the things I learned is the Stork Club, not a bad drink at all, and I really quite like the milk clarified version. So this is looking like being the double fisting channel all the time. Oh well, there are worse things in the world. I'm going to get back to this. I hope you look after yourself. I hope things go well for you. Hope to see you again soon, but I'll say bye for now. And from Lucius, cheers.